Why are big bosses hitting the shop floor? We're going to learn about that from Joann Lublin, who's going to come on the set now. Hitting the shop floor. I thought, a lot of bosses, some places, they never go near the factory, and that's kind of how they like it. But some bosses are doing different now. Why is that?
Well, I think the whole idea here is if you don't know what people are doing who are at the front line, who are dealing with your customers every day, how can you be an effective big boss? And this was a career advice column in which I pointed out if you want to be successful as an executive, you need to know what's going on at the front line. And the three people I wrote about had all tried that experience at being in a frontline job, either early or late in their careers, and it changed their whole attitude about being a leader.
And does it genuinely have a difference on the morale of the rank and file employees if they feel that their bosses know exactly what they've gone through?
Well, in each of these cases, none of these bosses ever did it for very long.
Right.
The longest any one of the three I wrote about was for 3 weeks. One did it for 3 days, another did it for a week, and he was on TV for that. There's a certain amount of cynicism when you see people doing this. Like, they don't really know what it's like to toil in the warehouse or be a delivery truck driver. But on the other hand, they think it's kind of cool that they're willing to at least find out.
Well, and we're obviously not talking about CEOs who, rose through the ranks, started in the mailroom and occupied the C-suite. You're talking about people who have basically either inherited the business, inherited the corner office, or somebody who basically went through the academic regimen that would take you into those lofty positions.
Right. And the one example is of a guy who came into his company that his parents owned, and they said, for your first year on the job, he was straight out of college, you're going to have to try out every single position we have in the company so you understand what holds it all together. And about 7 years later, he became CEO, and now that company is the biggest Verizon wireless dealer in the U.S.
Okay.
And he thinks it's partly because he understands what people have to go through every day.
So how much do you think this will catch on as a fad? You know how management has its fad, and management gurus have their fads, and they suddenly say, well, now everybody's got to do this. And there's often a groan amongst middle management. Oh, no, what's the latest? What's the strategy du jour? Do you think this could become strategy du jour, and then a lot of people being forced to do something that they just go through the motions of doing, and it actually is just really just a pain?
Well, I actually think it's a fad that came, and I wrote about it 5 years ago, and then it kind of fell out of favor during the downturn.
Yeah.
And I think now it's coming back because people are recovering. They're recognizing if they want to keep growing, they're going to have to start grooming some better talent at the top. And how can you be a good leader if you don't understand what the people are who are making your business happen every day go through on their jobs?
Didn't the communist China, practice something just like this? I
don't live in China.
For 3 weeks a year, I think the Communist Party members, leadership would have to go, put on a hat and go toil in the fields.
And that was a very disastrous thing called the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah, it didn't exactly work out.
As I recall.
Yeah, it didn't exactly work there. I mean, one of the other things this could do is that if you've got someone and there's holding 32 positions for half a day to 3 weeks per job, half a day. I mean, you barely find your desk in half a day in most jobs. Right. Would that make some people just arrogant and saying to get back to the corner office and say, well, I've done everything, so buzz off and just make it work?
Well, in this case, this kid, he was a kid. He was straight out of college. His parents owned the company. They didn't want the people who worked there to think he was just some arrogant, snot-nosed kid who was going to inherit it no matter what he did. They wanted the people who worked there to understand that he wanted to understand what it was like to work there. But frankly, some of these jobs didn't take more than half a day for him to figure them out.
That's interesting. Now, the other thing that some family businesses do is they insist that the kids work somewhere else, and only if they're successful do they invite them back, and that way you get
or they work their way up through the organization, but over maybe a 15-year period in which they start out at the lowly job and gradually work their way up. This was a kind of a total immersion in 1 year, so I thought that was kind of cool.
This is a good move.
Well, I do. I mean, I think anytime you've got management saying, I've got to be able to get my arms around exactly what we're doing, how we serve our customers, what our products and services are useful for.
And what people don't like about their jobs, okay? And one of the points of doing this column is I said you don't have to have done this to learn from their leadership lessons and how to be an empathetic leader. You have to ask for feedback. You have to find out what people think is wrong. You have to give them some answers when they want changes, even if you don't adopt them. You have to make it clear that people at the top are not living in some isolated, executive suite,
right.
where they have no concept as to what goes on day to day in that company.
And I think we've seen some leaders when they sort of start to try and placate the workforce that may be unhappy, saying, well, what do you think? What do you think we should do?
Right.
And they ask the question, and they get the answers, and then they do absolutely nothing,
Exactly.
making it even worse. Does that? I mean, it really is, because if you ask the question and say, what do you want, and then to do nothing, it's just like, well, why do you ask? So, do you think this sort of going through this immersion in lots of different jobs helps with that, and helps with people saying, we're not going to ask if we don't really want to know?
Right, one would hope. I mean, another example in here is DaVita, which is a dialysis clinic operator, where starting in 2002, anyone who moved into senior management at the vice president level had to spend 3 days working as a dialysis technician if they had no prior experience working in a clinic. And I accompanied that woman 5 years ago when I first wrote about this. That was tough work, and you're dealing with people's lives. And she became such a different vice president after that. She saw everything, and even more so today, through the filter of what is this going to mean for the lives of people who we're caring for as part of our doing our job. So if you're looking at life from the bottom up rather than the top down, you're going to have to listen to what people are complaining about, or else you're not doing your job.